I was sitting in a small hotel room in Houston, Texas, when my phone rang. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just finished eating a sandwich alone at the little desk by the window, watching the sun go down over the highway. I was tired. My knees were hurting. They always hurt when I travel now. I'm 63 years old. I've spent 40 years working. 40 years of early mornings, late nights, missed dinners, and quiet sacrifices that nobody ever counted. I looked down at my phone. It was Sandra, my wife. I smiled when I saw her name. Even after 31 years of marriage, I still smiled when she called. That tells you something about me. That tells you what kind of man I am. I answered, "Hey, sweetheart." I was just about to, but she didn't let me finish. Her voice was different, cold, flat, like she had rehearsed what she was going to say 100 times and didn't want emotion to get in the way. "Gerald," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." I put my sandwich down. "Okay," I said, "I'm listening." There was a pause, just 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds I felt something shift inside me. Like the ground beneath, my feet moved just slightly, like something was coming that I couldn't stop. "I'm divorcing you," she said. The words landed like a stone dropping into still water. I didn't speak. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she continued. "I've sold the apartment. I'm starting over. There's someone else, Gerald, and I'm choosing him." I sat there in that hotel room in Houston, Texas, 63 years old, with a half-eaten sandwich in front of me and the Houston skyline going orange and purple outside my window. And you know what I said? I said, "Okay," just that, one word. And that one word, that simple, quiet, dignified word, started a chain of events that would shake my entire family to its foundation. My name is Gerald Owens. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, the second of 5 children. My father was a carpenter. My mother cleaned houses for other families. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered. We had a table where we ate together. We had a father who prayed over us every morning. We had a mother who made every birthday feel like the most important day in the world, even when all she could afford was a store-bought cake and a single candle. I learned early that life requires 2 things, your hands and your character. Everything else is borrowed. I moved to Atlanta when I was 22 with $200 and a used suitcase. I got a job in logistics. I worked my way up slowly, not because I was the smartest man in the room. I never was. But because I was the most consistent. I showed up every single day. I kept my word. I never cut corners. By the time I was 35, I was a regional operations manager. By 45, I was running 2 distribution centers. Not glamorous work. Not the kind of career that makes people gasp at dinner parties. But honest work, solid work, work I could be proud of. I married Sandra when I was 32. She was 30. She was beautiful, still is. Sharp mind, quick laugh, and this way of tilting her head when she was thinking that I never got tired of watching. We built something together, a home, a life. We had 1 son, Marcus. Marcus was everything to me. I know fathers aren't supposed to say things like that, like your whole world orbited around 1 child, but it's the truth. From the moment that boy was born, I understood what I was working for. Every extra shift, every night away, every holiday I missed because someone had to cover the warehouse, it was all for him. I wanted Marcus to have more than I had. I wanted him to start the race 10 steps ahead of where I started. And he did. Marcus went to college, got his degree in business, got a good job at a marketing firm in Atlanta, married a woman named Diane, sharp, ambitious, well put together. They had a beautiful daughter, my granddaughter, Lily. She was 4 years old at the time all of this happened. On the outside, we looked like a perfect family. But here's what nobody tells you about perfect-looking families. The cracks are always there. You just have to know where to look. Sandra and I We didn't fall apart overnight. That's never how it happens. It's more like a photograph that fades. One day, it's vivid and full of color. And then slowly, so slowly you barely notice, the colors get lighter. Until one day you hold it up and you barely recognize the people in it. Looking back, I can see the signs I ignored. Sandra had started spending more time with her sister, Renee. That was fine. I encouraged it. Renee had gone through a divorce herself a few years before, and Sandra wanted to support her. But Renee had opinions, strong ones about men, about marriage, about what a woman deserved. I heard snippets of it over the years. Things Sandra would repeat at dinner. Renee says a woman my age should be living her best life. Renee says I've given up too much. Renee says you travel too much, Gerald. I always nodded. I always listened. I didn't argue because I didn't want to put Sandra in a position where she had to choose between her husband's ego and her sister's friendship. That was a mistake. Silence, I would learn, can be misread as indifference. And then there was Marcus. My son had changed in the years since his marriage. I don't blame Di, and entirely, that would be unfair. But Diane came from a family that measured success loudly. Cars, vacations, house size, neighborhood, club memberships. And slowly, those measurements became Marcus's measurements too. He started looking at me differently around the time I turned 60. Like I had become. Less, he never said it directly. He didn't have to. It was in the way he'd cut me off mid-sentence at family dinners, the way he'd roll his eyes when I talked about my work, the way he'd step me in conversations, and direct everything toward Sandra, like I was background furniture. Once, at Lily's 3rd birthday party, Diane said to someone, not quietly enough, "Oh, Gerald is just retired. He used to do logistics or something." I was not retired. I was still working, full-time. I said nothing. I just smiled and carried Lily on my shoulders while she wore her little paper crown, and I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. I found out his name 2 days after the phone call. His name was Victor. Victor was 54. 9 years younger than me. He owned a chain of nail salons. He drove a BMW. He had hair, which I do not. And apparently, according to what Sandra later told Marcus, who then told me, because Sandra stopped speaking to me directly, Victor made her feel seen. Seen. I turned that word over in my head for a long time. I had spent 31 years making sure Sandra was warm, fed, loved, protected, and provided for. Our apartment, the one she sold, I had paid off that mortgage myself years early, with extra payments I made every month while skipping things I wanted. I never bought myself the truck I wanted, never took the fishing trip with my old friends from Charlotte. I put every extra dollar into that mortgage, into savings, into Marcus's college fund, and she didn't feel seen. Maybe that was my failure. Maybe I spoke the language of provision when she needed the language of attention. I've thought about that. I've thought about it honestly, but here's the part that came next. Here's the part where things turned. When I got back from Houston, when I walked into that apartment and found half the furniture gone and a note on the kitchen counter from Sandra's lawyer, I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I didn't call Marcus screaming. I called Marcus calmly. I told him I was home. I told him I knew about everything. Marcus came over that evening. And what he said to me in that empty apartment, standing in a kitchen where half the cabinet contents were gone, looking at his father of 31 years of sacrifice. "I don't think I'll ever fully recover from it, Dad," he said. "I think Mom deserves to be happy. She's been waiting a long time. I think you need to let her go gracefully." I looked at my son. "Gracefully," I repeated. "Don't make this ugly," he said. "Don't drag it out. Just sign whatever she needs you to sign." I looked at him for a long moment. This boy I had carried on my shoulders. This man I had put through college. This son I had driven 3 hours to see every single month after he moved to the other side of Atlanta. "Okay," I said, and I meant it, but not in the way he thought. "Here is where I need to stop and tell you something. Something nobody in my family knew. Something I had been carrying quietly for 18 months. You see, while I was traveling for work, all those business trips that Sandra resented, all those weeks in hotel rooms in Houston and Memphis and Charlotte, I was not just managing distribution routes. For the last year and a half, I had been in talks with a company called Meridian Logistics Partners, a private firm based in Dallas that was looking to acquire regional operations expertise and bring in an equity partner. They wanted me not as an employee, as a partner. They had approached me 18 months before the phone call in Houston. And for 18 months, I had said nothing to Sandra, not because I was hiding it from her, but because I am a careful man, a patient man, a man who does not celebrate before the harvest. The deal had not been signed. The terms were still being negotiated. And I had learned from 40 years in business that you do not count money that is not yet in your hands. But 2 days before Sandra called me that Tuesday evening in Houston, I had signed the papers. The partnership was official. My equity stake in Meridian Logistics Partners was worth, at that moment of signing, $1.4 million. $1.4 million. And Sandra, who had already spoken to a lawyer, who had already planned her exit, who had already decided I was a man not worth staying for, Sandra did not know. She thought she was leaving a tired, aging logistics manager with a pension and a paid-off apartment she had already sold. She had no idea she was leaving a partner in a 7-figure business deal. I sat in that half-empty apartment the night Marcus told me to be graceful, and I thought about telling him. Right then, right there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was dignity. Maybe it was the quiet voice of my father, who used to say, "Gerald, the man who reveals his hand too early always loses." I just said okay, and I waited. Tone becomes tense and methodical. The divorce moved quickly. Sandra's lawyer was efficient. I hired my own, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been practicing family law in Atlanta for 20 years, and who, when I laid everything out for her in her office, looked at me over her glasses and said very quietly, "Mr. Owens, do you understand what position you're actually in right now?" "I believe I'm beginning to," I told her. Georgia, like many states, is an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally. The apartment had already been sold. Sandra had handled that without my consent, which, Patricia informed me, was legally complicated, since my name was on that deed too. That was the first thing Sandra's lawyer had missed. The second thing they missed was the Meridian partnership. Under Georgia law, assets acquired during a marriage, including business interests, can be considered marital property. But there are exceptions, and Patricia was very good at finding exceptions. The business negotiations had begun before the marriage ended. But the signing happened before Sandra filed, and the structure of the agreement, the way it was written, the timeline created a very specific legal situation. I won't pretend I understood every detail. Patricia understood it. That's what I paid her for. What I will tell you is that by the time Sandra's lawyer finally discovered the Meridian deal, 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, the tone of every conversation changed. I remember getting a call from Marcus during that period. "Dad," he said, and his voice was different now. Less confident. "Is it true that there's a company in Dallas?" "Yes," I said. Silence. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't think it was relevant until it was final." I said, "It's been my practice not to celebrate before the harvest." Another silence. "Dad, Mom her lawyer is saying things are more complicated now." "I imagine they are," I said. Can we talk? Can you come over?" "Sure, Marcus," I said. "Let me know when." They invited me to dinner the following Sunday. Marcus and Diane's house, a nice house in a good neighborhood. A down payment I had contributed to, quietly, without ever asking for recognition. When I arrived, Sandra was there. I hadn't seen her since before Houston. She looked well. She looked rested. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something new she had bought in the new chapter of her life. She looked at me when I walked in, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Uncertainty. Diane had made a roast. Little Lily ran to me the moment I walked in. Grandpa, Grandpa. And I picked her up and held her close and breathed in the smell of her hair and thought, whatever happens in this room tonight, this is real. This is mine. Nobody can take this. We sat down to eat. For the first 20 minutes, it was surface conversation. How was the drive? Lily's new preschool? The weather? All the careful, practiced words that families use when they're trying to get to something hard. Then Marcus put his fork down. Dad, he said, I want to apologize. I looked at him. I said some things when I came to the apartment that were. I didn't treat you with the respect you deserved. I was taking Mom's side because she's my mother and she was hurting. But that doesn't excuse how I spoke to you. I nodded slowly. Thank you, Marcus, I said. Then Sandra spoke. Gerald. Her voice was quiet. Careful, nothing like the flat, rehearsed voice from the phone call in Houston. Gerald, I need to say something. I waited. I made a decision quickly, and I made it while I was angry, and while I was influenced by people who didn't have the full picture. I thought of Renee. I said nothing. I didn't know about the company in Dallas, but I want you to know that's not why I'm saying this. Then why are you saying it? I asked. She looked down at the table. Because I was watching Lily run to you tonight, and I remembered every time Marcus ran to you like that when he was small, and I started thinking about all the times you came home from those trips, and the first thing you did was ask me how my day was. Every single time, before you even put your bag down, every single time. And Victor, she stopped. Victor doesn't ask, she said softly. The table was very quiet. He talks, she continued. He takes me places. He buys me things, but he doesn't ask. He never asks how my day was. I looked at my wife of 31 years. Sandra, I said carefully, what are you telling me? She looked up and her eyes were wet. I think I made a terrible mistake. Music swells, emotional peak. I want to be honest with you right now, because this story is about truth. Part of me, the part that still loved her, the part that had smiled every time she called for 31 years, wanted to reach across that table and take her hand. But there was another part of me, a quieter part. A part that had spent 3 weeks alone in that half-empty apartment, sleeping on a mattress because the bed frame had gone with the furniture Sandra sold, eating cereal for dinner because I hadn't had the energy to restock the kitchen. That part remembered something, and so I said what I needed to say. Sandra, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She nodded. When you called me in Houston, when you said those words, were you hoping I would fight? Were you hoping I would beg? Because when I said okay, did that surprise you? She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she finally whispered. It did. Why? Because I don't know what I thought. I think I wanted you to fight for me. I think I wanted you to prove that you couldn't live without me. I breathed slowly. Sandra, I have been fighting for you for 31 years. Every trip I took was a fight for our future. Every extra mortgage payment was a fight. Every time I came home tired and still asked how your day was, that was me fighting. That was me choosing you every single day without making speeches about it. Diane put her hand over her mouth. Marcus looked at the table. I didn't know how to show you that I saw you. I continued. I'm not perfect. I know I wasn't always present in the way you needed, but Sandra, I never stopped choosing you, not for one single day. The tears were running down her face now. And now? I said softly, I don't know if we can go back. I genuinely don't know. What's been set in motion has been set in motion. Papers have been filed. Decisions have been made, and I can't pretend the last month didn't happen. I know, she said. I know. But I want you to understand something. I looked around the table at Sandra, at Marcus, at Diane holding Lily in her lap. The money in Dallas, the partnership, none of that changes who I am. I am the same man who drove a used car for 12 years so Marcus could have new school clothes every September. I am the same man who fixed the roof himself one summer because we needed to save the money. I am not a successful man because of that deal. I am a successful man because I kept my character through 40 years of hard work. That was always the real asset. The money is just evidence of it. Nobody spoke. Little Lily looked up from Diane's lap and said, in her tiny 4-year old voice, "Grandpa, are you sad?" I looked at her, and for the first time since Houston, my eyes filled with tears. "A little bit, sweetheart," I said. "But I'll be okay." Music becomes gentle. Resolution tone. The divorce proceedings were suspended. Sandra and I agreed to pause the legal process and enter couples counseling. I won't lie to you and tell you it was easy or beautiful or that love fixed everything overnight. That's not real life. Real life is slower. Real life is two people sitting across from a therapist twice a week, excavating 31 years of silence and assumption and unmet needs. There were sessions where Sandra cried for an hour, sessions where I said things I had held in for years and felt them finally leave me, sessions where we sat in silence and the therapist let us sit there, because sometimes silence is where the real work happens. Victor was told it was over. Sandra said that conversation was brief. Victor, it turned out, did not take it gracefully. He had assumed the apartment sale money was his to share in. When he found out, Sandra had returned the sale proceeds to a joint account as part of the legal proceedings, well, his true character showed itself quickly. Sandra told me later, sitting at the table of a coffee shop we used to go to when we were dating, he showed me exactly who he was when I said I was going back to you. Renee warned me he was different from what he seemed. I should have listened to her sooner. You should have listened to yourself sooner, I said. She nodded, yes, I should have. Marcus came to me privately, about 6 weeks after that Sunday dinner. He met me at a park bench near my office, well, what used to be my office. I was working from home mostly now, managing my Meridian responsibilities remotely. He sat down beside me, and for a while neither of us spoke. Two men on a bench in October, watching the leaves fall. Finally he said, "Dad, I don't think I've ever properly thanked you." "For what?" "For everything." His voice broke on that word. "For the school clothes, for the college, for the house, for just always being there, quietly, without making a big deal of it. I took it for granted. I looked at you and I saw a quiet, ordinary man and I thought, I don't know what I thought. I didn't think enough. I put my hand on his shoulder. You were wrong," I said, "but you're here now. That's what matters. I don't deserve Marcus." I stopped him. "You're my son. You don't have to deserve my love. You have it. That's not the part that changes." He cried on that park bench, my son. A grown man in a good coat, crying into his hands. And I sat with him the way my father once sat with me, without rushing, without filling the silence, just being present, being solid, being a place where it was safe to fall apart. Music becomes reflective, slower. I've had a lot of time to think since those months. Sandra and I did not get back together immediately. It took another 4 months of counseling. It took Sandra ending things completely with Victor, returning to her sister's house for a time, and then slowly, carefully, finding her way back. The apartment we sold, we didn't buy it back. Someone else lives there now. But we found a smaller house, quieter, with a yard where Lily can run when she visits. We built something new, not a restoration, a new thing, built on the rubble of the old thing, but new. I want to tell you what I learned, because this story, my story, is not just about a marriage. It's about something larger. It's about the invisible people in every family. You know who they are. Every family has one. The quiet one. The consistent one. The one who doesn't complain, doesn't demand, doesn't put their contributions on a billboard. The one who fixes the roof in the summer heat. The one who works the extra shift. The one who asks, "How was your day?" before putting their own bag down. Those people get overlooked, not out of malice usually, just out of habit, just because they've never forced anyone to see them, just because they've always made it look easy. And one day, those invisible people aren't there anymore. And the family looks around at the wreckage and they say, "We didn't know. We didn't realize." But they could have realized. They could have looked. They chose not to. I was that invisible person. And when the world finally looked, when my value became undeniable, when it had a number attached to it in a Dallas courtroom, they looked. And they saw me. But here's the moral lesson I want to leave with you today. I didn't become worth seeing because of the money. I was always worth seeing. The money just removed their excuse for not looking. Real love, the kind that endures, the kind that deserves to be called love, doesn't need a dollar amount to justify its attention. Real love sees the man fixing the roof in August heat. Real love sees the woman who raised the children while her husband worked nights. Real love sees the father who skipped his truck so his son could have college textbooks. If you're watching this right now and you have a quiet person in your life, someone who keeps showing up, keeps giving, keeps choosing you without fanfare, go to them today. Not because they're rich, not because you found out they have something to offer you, but because they are a human being who deserves to be seen while they are still there to see. Don't wait for them to be gone. Don't wait for the phone call from Houston. Don't wait for the half-empty apartment. See them now. Music slowly fades, quiet, dignified ending. My name is Gerald Owens. I am 63 years old. I have a wife who chose to come back, not because of a business deal in Dallas, but because she remembered the sound of a man who always asked how her day was. I have a son who cried on a park bench in October because he finally understood what he had almost lost. I have a granddaughter named Lily who runs to me with her arms wide open every single time she sees me. And I have myself, the same man I have always been, quiet, patient, consistent, a man who learned from his carpenter father and his house, cleaning mother, that character is the only currency that never loses its value. When Sandra called me that Tuesday in Houston and told me she was leaving, I said one word, okay, not because I didn't care, not because I had given up, not because I was defeated. I said okay because I knew something then, in that hotel room, that the rest of them were still learning. I said okay because a man who knows his own worth doesn't have to argue about it. He just waits, and the truth always comes home.